I'd like to say good morning to the class and good morning to everybody out there in Facebook land and all the technology that we got going on. Just want to say good morning to everybody and hope your day has started good. God woke us up this morning, and so we know that's a good start. Because once we open our eyes and still can move around just a little bit, we know that God is still in charge. He's still able. And we're going to start our Sunday school lesson off by repeating our watchword. I'm glad to be in the house of the Lord, on the Lord's day, in the name of the Lord. And if you really believe that, let's give God a hand clap of praise, because he's worthy to be praised this morning. And we're going to be talking today from Luke chapter 11, verse 37 through 44. And this is September the 3rd, 2023, lesson 10. The subject is attitudes and action. Background passage, Luke 11, 37 through 44. The print passage is Luke 37 through 44. Key verse is, "And the Lord said unto him, Now do ye Pharisees make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but your inward part is full of raven and wickedness." And if you go to the New Revised Version, it says it's of wickedness and greed. So we're going to talk about your attitudes and your action. But first, let's have a word of prayer. Jesus, just want to thank you for allowing us to come together just one more time in your name. Jesus, let this lesson teach us about our attitudes and our actions, Jesus. We know that you got all power in your hand, Jesus. So just go with us and stand by us, Jesus. And just let me be less of me and more of you, that your people might hear your word and understand. Just lead, guide, and show us the way, Jesus. All these blessings we ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. This lesson, I first looked at this lesson, I read, you have to look at it, and I read this lesson over the first time. I kind of was trying to think, what is this lesson really about? Attitudes and actions. And I noticed we used to have a saying that your attitude determines your altitude. And in this passage, what Jesus is trying to get across to him is that our inside should match our outside. The verse, the chapter 11, it starts off with, in the passage it says it started off with Jesus teaching the disciples how to pray. But as I looked at the passage in the King James Version, it actually starts off with Jesus praying. Jesus was actually praying, and then one of the disciples asked him after he finished praying to teach them how to pray as John taught his disciples to pray. And so that in the beginning tells me that if Jesus had to pray, as Deacon Ralph used to say, what about me? So we all need to always pray. They say in season and out of season. They necessarily got to be, it can be when things going good and when things going bad. We still need to pray because we still need Christ in our life. And Jesus was talking, and as he was praying, he was interrupted. They said by a man that was possessed with a demon. And Jesus got the demon out of the man, and the Pharisees was kind of like wanting to know, how did he do this? And they finally come to the conclusion that he did it out of the fact that, out of Satan, that he was working for Satan. But Jesus broke down the logic of their thing and let them know that a kingdom that's divided within itself cannot stand. And he also was letting the Pharisees know that he was great. He was greater than Jonah. Because Jonah, when he preached to the nation of Nineveh, and Nineveh repented. But Jesus was trying to let them know that when he was teaching his disciples how to pray, that somebody was here greater than them, greater than Jonah. He was trying to let them know that he was greater than Jonah. And we get to our topic. We got three outlines. The rejected host is verse 37 to 38. A rebuke host, Luke 11, 39 through 41. And a renounced leader in host, Luke 11, 42 and 40 through 44. And as we open our lesson up, he said, and while Jesus was teaching the disciples how to pray, he was telling them about how to pray. A Pharisee invited him to dine with him. And that's verse 37. It says, while he was speaking, a Pharisee invited him to dine with him. So he went in and took his place at the table. Okay, so Jesus, it was an unusual invitation because the Pharisee was trying to trap Jesus. They were trying to get something on him because when the Jews, while he was teaching them, let me get this right. I got to get my head right here. When he was teaching them about the how to pray, and when he was invited, he didn't hesitate to go with the Pharisees to dine. Because Jesus, in some of the other texts and everything, Jesus did eat with certain amount. When he was invited, he did sit down and eat. But the Pharisees had something else in mind when he invited them, because Jesus was talking about how to pray and telling the disciples how to pray. And the Pharisees, at that time, the Pharisees were a religious group that was formulated during the Jews' 70-year expedition in Babylon. And by the time the Jews arrived back into Jerusalem, the Pharisees had drawn up more than 613 religious and civil laws. So they had all of these laws that they was going by. 613, Christ gave us the 10 Commandments, and it's hard for us to keep the 10 Commandments. 613 religious and civil law. So Jesus, he went to the dine with the Pharisees, and he went straight on to the table. Now, in 38 said that the Pharisees was amazed to see that he did not first wash before dinner. Okay, now, with what I was understanding, I asked God to show me was that why, Jesus didn't wash, but he had his reason for not washing this. And it wasn't about just washing your hands for cleanliness. The Pharisees wasn't into the cleanliness part of it. It was a ceremony that they had to go through before they ate. And when Jesus went in, he just went into the table and sat down. And so they kind of caught the Pharisee kind of looking like, you know. And you would think, since the Pharisees supposedly been so religious and upstanding and all of this, that Jesus would go in and go through their little ceremony and go to the table. But Jesus, he didn't do it. Because they had a thing where you had to wash your hand. When you first went in, they had a stone vase that was full of water. And this was water that's what that water was especially for. It was for the washing of the hands before they eat. And so, and the ceremony was that someone would pour water over your hands, and it had to run off of your wrist before it couldn't go up your arm now, because your arm will be unclean if the water went up your arm. They poured the water in your hand, and your hand had to be held such a way that it runs off of your wrist. And then that was part of it. Then you would take your fist and you'd rub it into your palm of your hand on each one. And then they would take it and you pour water from your wrist down and had it run off the end of your fingers. Now that was the ceremony that they went through before they ate. And if any of the Pharisees omitted any part of that, they would have sinned. That would be actually a sin for them to eat and then go through the complete ritual. And so Jesus didn't go through that ritual. He went straight on to the table. Because later down in the lesson we'll see is because their inside did not match up with what they was portraying to be. Any questions on that? Any comments?
They were more concerned about the law and tradition than they was about worshiping God.
Yeah, they was more concerned about their outer appearance, the outer, share what they looked like. But and when we get into the next outline, that's what it said. But this outline here was basically just to bring us into how the Pharisees was, some of the laws that they had that they wanted the people to follow. Okay, and then we'll go to as for the second outline, it said rebuke hosts. 39, and the Lord said, 39 in the New Revised Version said, then the Lord said to him, now you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. Okay, so their attitude wasn't matching their actions. They wanted everything on the outside. They was more outward. You know, they wanted everything to be perfectly clean and everything on the inside. But Jesus was letting them know that in your heart, you're full of greed and wickedness. You clean the outside, but you're inside. And you know, some people will like that now. You know what I'm talking about? We can give you an outside show. We clean, we perfect, and there's no such. It wasn't so much about what Jesus was saying about clothes and stuff. It's about the way they treated people, the way they acted, the way they talked to people, the way they handled things according to the laws and everything. Jesus was really trying to get over to the Pharisees that your actions are not matching up with what you're teaching the people. And he also said that people will put up a front. We can come to church. We can be here for everything. But really, how are you in your heart? What's going on? Jesus was trying to let them know it was more concerned about what's going on in our heart than it is on what we do on the outside. We can go to church every time the door's open, we can be here. But how is your heart? We're only doing the outward part of it. We're not treating our neighbors right. We're not treating people right. So when he was saying that they were cleaning the inside of the platter, the outside of the platter, the cup in the platter, but you're not living the laws that you put out. You're not living the laws. You're not thinking about God. You're more concerned about your outer appearance, your outer work that you're doing for God. The outer. And he said, you're doing, and then we get on down in the lesson, he'll let you know some of the things that they're doing right, but they got a problem. 40. He said, you fools, did not one who made the outside make the inside also? He wanted them to know that God made the outside as well as the inside. But our actions should match our attitudes. If we should, what they say, walk the walk and talk the talk, you got to be, God is more concerned on what's going on in our heart. He's more concerned about how we're treating people, how we're loving people. Because, sometimes you can be following the law and it's not following God spiritually. I'm talking about you're not doing what you should be doing spiritually. We had an incident once at work. The law says, for home transit, this is say that if a person gets on the bus and he's kind of, the law tells us that we're not supposed to get off the bus and go in their house, not to go in their house to take, if they got groceries and stuff like that. We're not supposed to go in the house. But if you got a person that's disabled, they're not supposed to bring anything on the bus that they can't carry off. But this person is just disabled. Do we just let that person just get off and try to take it on, or do we get off and help? At least take it to the porch. So it's kind of a situation where the law tells us we ain't supposed to do it. But, what's that?
I just said your heart says something else.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Your heart's telling you now that this just ain't right. I'm sitting up here. I'm sitting up here.
About the liability.
Yeah, yeah.
Go in that house. So technically it was really protecting you.
Yeah,
Your heart may say, but if you go in the house with them, what if you helping them in the house and you fall? You got nothing to stand on.
Oh, yeah.
So the law says you as the driver, you're supposed to stay on the bus.
Yeah.
They have to have somebody, so that's
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so I'm just giving a scenario where, it's the way you think, it's where your heart at. And I know we're not supposed to, but it is a situation where it's protecting the person that's driving. Now we don't go in the house, but they'll allow us. They say, well, you can't just sit on the porch, but we don't go in the house because you're out of sight then. So. It's just it's a situation where your heart telling you one thing and the law saying something else.
A lot of times the laws don't meet to what God's standards want you to do.
Yeah.
Lots of situations too.
Yeah.
Not only that situation, but lots of things. They have rules and regulations on jobs.
Oh yeah.
He's not pleased with.
Yeah. Well, I was looking at Ann in Mayberry sometime. I was looking at one episode where he was trying to explain to his son that about the law, and he was saying that if a little boy, they had a sign up at this lake said, "No swimming, no getting into the water," and said if two little boys down there, and one little boy jumped in anyway, and he can't swim. He started drowning. He said, what do? Do you stand up there and watch him drown if you can swim, or do you jump in and save him? So, you know what I'm saying? But the law said not to get in there. But he got it. That boy got in there anyway. But by him standing there, do you jump in to save him since you can swim, or do you stay on the bank and watch him drown?
You know, it goes back to what Deacon Johnny said. When you work at a restaurant, we waste food because it's been there so long. Then you got people that come in and hungry.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot give them that food
Yeah.
because you got to look. I know what the law says. I know what it is with God and everything. But sometimes you just got to use what it says.
Yeah.
You can't give them food because a lot of times people will trick you
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
and sue you
Yeah.
and said they gave me that old food and I got sick.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then you in trouble.
Oh,
so
yeah.
what you have to do, you just have to do what you got to do. You know, I know we had a lot of people that come in at McDonald's when I worked there, and they were hungry, and you could tell. We waste this food, but you cannot give them food that's been sitting there
Oh,
for
yeah.
a long period
Yeah.
of time.
Yeah.
You got to look out for your well-being and your job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So he was getting back to the lesson. He was saying that he was letting them say, "You food did not one who make the outside make the inside." He letting them know that the same God that made the outside made the inside, and our outside should match our inside. Our inside should match our outside. We should be the same. And then we'll go to 41, and he said, "So give for alms those things that are within, and see everything will be clean for you." Okay. He said, just because you're paying your tithes, just because you take communion, just because you come to all programs, just because every time the doors of the church are open, I'm here, that this makes everything all right. But it don't. He said, you're doing all the outward rituals of religion, but your insides, your heart, where is your heart at? What Jesus is trying to get them to see what's matter in your heart. Don't care what you're doing inside, outside, for this outside show to the world. What's in your heart? That's why I said Jesus deals with the heart. It's what's in your heart, because you cannot fool God. No, we can like I said, we can come to church every time the doors of the church open, we can be here. But what's in our heart? What are we actually living the life that we're trying to portray? And man, okay, go ahead.
If you go out with a group of people and y'all eat together and they don't bless their food, do you think that's sinful? If they don't pray before they eat. Because that's basically the same thing saying. If you go out with a bunch of people, we all sitting around on the table, and they don't bless their food, do we look at them differently? If they don't actually say the blessing before they eat. But if they don't, you know what I'm saying? Because just like washing the hands, do you condemn a person because they don't bless their food before they eat it? Do you think they're wrong for sinning? They don't bless their food. Just throw it out. I mean,
Yeah.
Because it's really like washing your hands. Do you look at people differently? We all sit around in a restaurant. Not that we in church and somebody pray for all of them. We sit around, everybody, and nothing. 3 or 4 people don't bow their head and bless their food. Would you look at them differently?
But how can
No.
you say they didn't, if they didn't, just because they didn't,
Yeah.
that mean they didn't say it. They didn't do a
Yeah.
prayer of ministry or something.
Okay, let's say, well, you ask them, say, you know, bless your name. No, I don't bless my food for you. How would you look at them differently? What do you think they were?
Yeah. Well, I guess that's yeah. It's a lot in this lesson that it gives you. you know, you look at the inside of it and you look at the other side of it, and it makes you think. And I think that's what this lesson was for, to make you think about what, you know, am I, you know, is my attitude matching up with my inside? Is my attitude matching up with my action?
It's the same thing that Deacon John was saying. What if one bless their food, eat, and then after you get through eating, they cut somebody out on the way out?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you bless your food, but you bless them out too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, it's like all that's in there together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, so it is like Brother Roger's saying, whatever on the inside of you,
Yeah.
gonna eventually come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gonna tell your inside gonna tell who you are. You know?
Yeah.
And it goes back to the old saying that says, you are what you do.
Yeah.
Not what you say.
Yeah.
Because you can make your mouth say anything.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if I look at you long enough, you are what you do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Eventually,
it will
you
show.
make sure that the occasion arrives where you're gonna have to make a choice to treat somebody right,
Yeah.
or you're gonna make a choice to treat them wrong. What's inside of you will come out. It's gonna come out eventually.
Yeah, and that's what Jesus was so upset as we get into the third outline when he said, "Whoa," because he can see that their attitudes was matching up with their action. They were saying one thing, but they wasn't actually doing what they was supposed to be saying. It didn't match up, and so Jesus was. That's why when he was sitting down for lunch, and like he was talking about the Pharisees wasn't into it as far as the washing the hand. They wasn't into the cleanliness part. It wasn't about getting the dirt off your hand and all that. It was more or less that ceremony that they had before they could eat. And they would sin if they didn't do it. That would be a sin. And so, like I said, and that was 613 laws that they had to try to keep up with. You know, we don't do the 10.
And that's why he said, judge ye not, because
Yeah.
just because I don't wash my hands or don't say my blessing, like Pastor say, there are other bad things that I do.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So, you know, how can I judge because you ain't saying your blessing? And like he said, go out there and cuss somebody out.
Oh yeah.
Or
Mm-hmm.
go out there and do something else that is wrong.
Yeah.
You know, you have to look at that.
Yeah. So is there any more comments on the second outline? Any more questions or comments? Okay, if not, then we'll go to the third outline. A renounced leader and host. And it said, 42 said, but woe to you Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and herbs of all kind, and neglect justice and the love of God. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. Okay, I read that, and you know, when you first read over it, you mind boggles. You're like, what is he really saying? And as I studied the lesson, he was when the Bible speaks of woe. Now that means that there's something that's, you know, it ain't sitting right with God. He letting you know right then, but he said, woe to you Pharisees, for you tithe, mint, and rue. And see, now what the Pharisees was doing was they was taxing extra, like the mint and the rue is supposed to actually have to pay tithes on them because they call it a minor spice. The law said they didn't have to pay taxes, but the Pharisees and all of their new laws and rules that they made up, they started attacking the people for their smaller gods like the mint and rue, and then they started taxing them on that. But now what the Pharisees was doing now, they still was giving God 10%. They still was giving him his 10% and everything, and they thought that made everything all right just because they was giving God this 10%, paying the tithes, and like I said, they were going to church and all this right here. They was doing that right. But they was not treating their fellow They wasn't treating them right. So he said, no matter what that's what you should have been doing. You should have been paying your tithes and going to church and tending to all of that right there. You should have been doing that. But you're not treating people right. You're not being fair. You're not being justice. And you're missing the love of God, because God is looking at your heart. He's looking at what we got inside our heart. And their heart wasn't right. They was doing right, but their heart wasn't right. The insides wasn't matching up with what they was doing to the people. They didn't care how they was treating their fellow man. And so they was and so that's why he said, but woe, Pharisees, for ye tithes and mint, rude, herbs, and all kinds, neglecting justice, wasn't giving justice to the people. And the love of God wasn't showing any love at all towards the people. But they thought just because they was paying their tithes and all that they was right. Outside show. And then it said, woe to you Pharisees, for you love to have the seat of honor in the synagogue and to be greeted with respect in the marketplace.
Come on now.
And so they're just still an outside show. Okay, they said in the synagogue, the ladies would sit on one side, the men would sit on the other side, but all of the priests and all of those would sit on the front seat with all of their, robes on and all of their show, and that's just for the people to see them there and come by and say, "Oh, how you doing, Brett? How you doing? You doing? Oh, it's good to see you." And just an outside show, just an outside show to the world. And so he said, "Woe to you, Pharisees! You love to have the seat of honor. Want to be recognized." Just, a lot of times people if they can be just standing out front, just, they getting all of the credit and all this, but how is their hearts? Where is their heart at? Is they doing it because of the love of God, or is they doing it just for a show? Sometimes we can get up and we can put on a big show, but then where's my heart at? What is I'm really thinking about? What is I'm really doing to back up what I'm portraying that I am? And I was reading, it was one of the scholars was saying that a lot of us are like a storefront, in a Western movie or something. When you looking at the outside of it, it looks just like it's real, look like everything is there. But then he said once you dig into it, you get behind it, ain't nothing but two befores and a front. You can push it over. It's not real. And that way we get sometimes where the song tells whatever we do for the Lord, let it be real. And we have to let our light shine and be real. Be yourself. If don't come in and put on a front in front of the people, and God still knows our heart. When they say a man, I just not quite understand when they say a man gain the whole world, die and lose his soul. But he could get out there and you can put on a front, everybody like you, and you've been the best person in the world, they think, but where is your heart? God knows. God knows our life. And then it said, woe to you, for you are like unmarked graves, and people walk over them without realizing it. And that was another one. I said, now woe to you, for you are like unmarked graves, and people walk over them without realizing it. And he was letting them know that, look, okay, it's just like if you go down to the cemetery and if it's a grave down there, the grass done growed over and don't have no mark on it, you can walk over it and don't even know you done went over it. But the Jews had respect for the dead. And that was in the law, that if a person taught a grave or dead body, that he would be unclean for 7 days. which meant he couldn't go in the temple and praise God for 7 days. And then that's what he was trying to get across to the Pharisees, that that's what they was like. You just like when people come in contact with you, you pollute them. They don't even know that they are unclean because of you. And so he was telling them that they were just like unmarked grave that people walk over and don't realize they're walking over. Does that make sense? If you, the way they portrayed themselves and the way they was, they caused people to be unclean. And people don't even know that they're unclean. Because they had failed to realize that God deals with the heart, and they had malice in their heart. They had greed in their heart. No justice. So that's what he was saying when he said, "Woe to you, for you are like unmarked graves, and people walk over them without realizing it." That means people dealing with you, you pollute them, and they don't even know that they are unclean. And the law says that if you touch a grave or come involved with a grave, you was unclean for 7 days. And he says, so people don't even realize they're unclean.
And that goes into being, when you're being an example for people. And somebody will come in here and say, Pastor Ham, or they looking at me on Sunday, and they saying, man, I want to be like Pastor Ham. I want to do that. I want to be like Pastor Ham. He do some good things, but they just looking at me on Sunday. Mm-hmm. But what if Pastor Ham, when he leave on Sunday, they're doing everything against what he preaches? Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just like Brother Rod is saying, I'm leading them in a way. You saying you want to be like Pastor Ham, but you don't know what Pastor Ham do Monday through Saturday. No. It could be opposite of what God wants me to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I could be leading them into a path that's not holy. And that's what Brother Rod was saying. You can be leading just by looking at you, you look right. Mm-hmm. But that don't mean you're right. Yeah. No. Mm-hmm. And that's what we have to be careful. Your action has got to line up, with what God will is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If your actions don't line up with God's will, then there's something wrong in them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And God said, "Woe unto you," because the Bible teaches us that if you lead astray one of these little children, yeah. Mm-hmm. And He wasn't talking about the children, He was talking about His children. Yeah. Everyone call themselves a child of God. Mm-hmm. If you lead just one of them astray, then all the condemnation falls on you. Coming from that. Yeah. I'm going to hold them accountable for the sin, but I'm going to hold you accountable for the sin that you led them into. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So not only am I going to get held accountable for what I did wrong, but I'm going to get held accountable for who I led into wrong. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it becomes one of those things what James said is be careful how you want to be a leader. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Be careful if you want to be a teacher, because it's a higher condemnation. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I know people say that all sins are the same and all gonna be judged the same. That ain't what James said. James said it's a higher condemnation. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. When you want to lead people. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I know we hear this thing where pastors and leaders say, I'm a man or a woman just like you. Wait a minute now. Yeah. Yeah. You weren't saying that when everybody was shaking your hand and congratulating you for you becoming the leader that you are. Yeah. But now that you make a mistake as a leader, all of a sudden you're a man or a woman just like everybody else. No. You can't have it both ways. No. No. Can't have it both ways. Yeah. Yeah. Because we need to definitely be careful, especially in leadership. Because you got some people they got you in a position for a reason, and that's what they look at. They look to follow you, and that you're leading them and guiding them right. Yep. But like you said, he can see you up here and then see you next week, and whole different thing.
So we need to be more concerned about what's going on with our heart. Don't put on a show and if your heart ain't there.
That's it.
You'd be surprised sometimes.
Yeah. Be shocked. You know, you'll be shocked.
Yeah. So we need to make sure that we're lining up with what we're portraying that we are. Because it's some things that we can better ourselves on. And God knows that we're not perfect. He knows that. He knows we're not perfect. But he wants us to strive to be the best person that we can be. And if we gonna get up and teach it, then we ought to be able to live by it. And we're gonna make mistakes. But what do we do after we make that mistake? Do it change? I was reading a little bit more in this lesson. It was saying about the scribes. They was in that same predicament. The lawyers. They was in that same predicament as the Pharisees. And that's another lesson, though. But just like if Pastor Hampton's up preaching, and he says something, we sitting in the audience, so he says something that can actually convict, your spirit will convict you something. It'll convict you. But what do you do about it? If you get up, if he convicted you, but if you get up and go outside and don't try to change or don't try to do anything about it, what good did it? One of the scholars was saying that it's just like a man looks in the mirror. He can go, we're always saying we need to start the man in the mirror. We look in the mirror. He said, if you look in that mirror and you see, and the spirit conviction shows you your mistakes, and you're looking in the mirror at yourself, but then as soon as you get out the mirror, you forget it. So we just need to be more. It made me think a lot more about my heart as far as what's on the inside. Is it matching up with what's on the outside? Because the show to the outside world said that ain't going to get it. So if we just think about this, like I said, this lesson made me think about a lot of things as far as to what I do in life. Am I being a good father? Am I being a good church member? Just because I'm here all the time, that don't mean I'm a good church member.
And then you have to let us stop judging, because I don't know what's going on in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you doing. All I know is about me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I gotta look out for me. Make sure my heart is right.
Mm-hmm.
Don't condemn or judge anybody else, because only God knows.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He knows.
And just because I might do one thing doesn't mean that my heart ain't with God.
Yeah.
And what we have to do, live the best that we can do, take care of yourself, and pray for everybody.
No. Mm-hmm. No. But I used to, when my son was here, he sometimes I would get at him about not being at church, and he'd go down to the drag strip or somewhere like that on Sundays instead of coming to church. And I was talking to him once about it, and he said, "Well, Dad," he said, "that don't mean my heart wasn't there." He said, I do that because, he said, sometimes I work all weekend. He said, so don't ever think that just because you don't see me there, that don't mean that my heart wasn't there. He said, yeah, I know. He said, I don't go like I should, but he said, I'll go, but he said, sometimes I just take off and do other things, but he said, that don't mean I don't love God. So.
To piggyback off of what your son was saying, you have some people who
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and they just have a problem with the conflict of a structured environment. Because a lot of times we work with these people.
Oh, yeah.
Or we are family members of these people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for them to see somebody come in church and speak in tongues, fall on the floor, praise their hands, and then when they get home, they're doing something different.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's not that they don't have a relationship with God.
Yeah.
Some people are, they have a problem with coming in here pretending.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So their relationship is their relationship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then also, you have people who physically cannot make it into the house of God.
Yeah.
What we
Mm-hmm.
consider church.
Yeah.
They're in a convalescent home. They may be in prison. You cannot hold that against people just because they don't come to church.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's all about their relationship with Christ, their fellowship with Christ. Now, if they don't come, that is between them
And
and
God.
God. When people have, especially with this COVID thing, and people have said now that they don't come to church because of this or that, hey, you have to tell me now.
Yeah.
Talk to God about
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need no excuses why you don't come to church.
No.
That's between you and God, and whatever he says, whatever conversation y'all have. But I truly believe that when your spirit is convicted, it's gonna draw you. You know, or if he have to knock some of us down to bring us back into the house. But to say that because somebody is not physically coming into the house of God, I leave that totally up to him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because the ones that are supposed to be here and the ones that are drawn to him will be here. You know, and I don't, that's one thing I don't judge, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just
It's just, you know, it's better to go to the throne than it is to come to the house and not be right.
yeah.
So that's what you want. You want your child, you want your loved one, and your friends and family. Go to the throne first.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That way you build your relationship with Christ. But what you're seeing in this day and age is you're seeing leadership get smaller. I don't know if y'all noticed that, but leadership is getting smaller.
Yeah.
The reason that leadership is getting smaller is because leadership don't want to be held accountable.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone telling me to act right. I don't want anyone telling me it's not all right to sing that song and do that prayer and then don't act right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So instead of me listening to that, I choose to say, even though God calling me to leadership, I choose to say, no, I ain't ready.
Yeah.
Or no, I ain't gonna do that because I got all this going on.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get my life in check to do
Yeah.
what God really wants me
Yeah.
to do. And that's why leadership is getting smaller, because I don't want anybody that I lead gonna have to hold me accountable. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah.
That's just that no way around that. If you leading, somebody got to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
Because you cannot lead people and then do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Not in the body of Christ, because Christ got a standard.
Yeah.
So you just can't lead any kind of way and look good and not be good.
Yeah.
Because that's not Christ-like.
Yeah.
Everybody trying to be Christ-like, right?
Yeah.
To be Christ-like, you gotta hold his likeness, the outside, and you
And
gotta hold his image,
inside.
the inside.
Yeah.
Either way you want to put it, image on the outside or likeness on the inside.
Yeah.
Either way, they got to match up.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that leadership had, and that's the problem that the Pharisees
See
had.
that? Yeah. That's the
They
main
wanted to
problem.
look holy,
Come on now, Pastor.
but was not holy.
Yeah.
And when you start calling leadership out like that, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
Leadership
And
got a problem.
Yeah. And that's why this whole lesson was about Jesus was trying to get across to the Pharisees. You're looking one way, but you're doing something else.
That's it.
And he was trying to let them know that. And some of the things that they were doing was right, but they still was wrong. So he had to, and that's what he was trying to get over to the Pharisees in this lesson. They added, but their attitudes and actions. So, is there any more comments, questions, or?
Good lesson.
Yes, it really was a good lesson to make you think, make you go to be concerned about what's in your heart, what's Was-
it's a
was-
good lesson, and in some form and fashion, it's a hard lesson. Because you do have to, bottom line is you got to hold leadership accountable.
Yep.
If you're gonna lead, then we got to hold you accountable.
Yep.
If you wanna step up on that platform, then there's a price to pay. And I don't think we stress that enough, especially in our spiritual leaders. Just because you sound good don't mean that you ought to be leading.
That's right. That's
You
right.
know what I mean? I know a lot of people that's got a lot of good things to say.
Yeah.
That don't mean that they need to be leading.
Leading, yeah. I'm gonna read this right here, and then I'll be done with the lesson. I want to thank everybody for their participation. And it said, we all have some areas of our lives that, if exposed, they would not be pleasing to our fellow brothers or sisters. Hopefully it is these areas that we are working on, so that we will look more like the person God is calling us to be. Since we are imperfect, there are some areas that will never be without fault, which should cause us to be grateful for God's mercy. In our lesson, Jesus reminds us that there are some things that may or may not be accepted by the masses, but we should do our best to live our lives in such a way that He is pleased. And I want to thank you and thank everybody for their participation. Oh, it's turn over to Pastor.
That's what Brother Roger just read kind of sums it up. Live your life in such a way that's pleasing to God. There's a reason that, although we say we should never follow man, the Apostle Paul made a statement, do the things that I do, because he was a leader. And he understood that I cannot preach this thing and teach this thing and not live this thing.
That's right.
And when our leaders get back into that realm to where we truly are leaders, because you can't be a leader from the outside and not from the inside. When we get back into that rightful place, and start leading like we should, then people will act like they're supposed to act. Everybody may not act right, but it's up to the leaders to lead right. You know what I mean? And I think that's very important. That's very important. How I treat people, how I speak to people, how I approach people, all the things that I present to people, even how I help people. It's just as important as a sermon I give. And if it's not, then my leading is not right. And that's just the bottom line. And that's accountability. When it all boils down, it's accountability. It makes no sense to have a pastor table in the back and then I won't speak to nobody in the front. It just don't work that way. It just don't work that way. It makes no sense to put on a robe and expect people to respect me and then I don't respect nobody else. You can't lead like that. And that's how the Pharisees will lead. And that's why the woes came. And those woes mean that condemnation coming somewhere. When he say woe, that means that you should have stopped a long time ago with whatever you were doing. So let us not fall into that. Let us not fall into that. Hold our leaders accountable. Hold them accountable. If they ain't doing right, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. That's just bottom line.
All right. Thank you for letting me be your teacher for today.
Good lesson. Good lesson.